comes to marketing strategy, just because you don't have a big budget doesn't mean you can't do something.
Producing a video for online use is that it's never going to be perfect.
I believe that there's a lot of confusion between what is social media, which is we see is a bit of a scattershot approach to in a very crowded space, to digital content marketing.
I tend to believe that all marketing should have a level of content associated with it. It makes it much more interesting.
Hi, welcome to the Advisory Deck. I'm Troy Forrest, the Managing Director of Strategy Road, and I'm joined by James McGill from Chatham Capital. How are you, James?
Hey Troy, I'm good.
Good to hear. We are once more on the Advisory Deck, riffing about all things strategy, business challenges and concepts in the ambition of trying to add some value to those watching, business owners, business leaders who are battling interesting, strange, uncertain, volatile, dynamic times. And so we sit on an advisory deck of sorts, and we have an advisory deck, which is kind of a little homemade deck of cards, and we pick sort of topics which we think are going to be quite pertinent. James and I were just talking before this conversation about a challenge which was not having a marketing budget or having restricted access to marketing funds, and I think it's a common challenge for a lot of organisations in this time where there will be some belt tightening. But where we took the conversation was this idea of content marketing, that we have the tools, ergo this little camera sitting on a tripod which you can't see, to create content, hopefully content of value, content that engages, content that brings audiences in and maybe helps them self-select and connect with you at our fingertips. And most of it's you've already got, so you don't have to pay a whole lot of money, maybe a little lapel microphone, but that's kind of about it. We're in an era, James, where we can do things that we had to hire very expensive marketing and advertising agencies for in the past, correct?
Absolutely. And before we start, I think sometimes hiring an expensive agency is still the right strategy, right? So I think when it comes to the marketing strategy, and we speak about strategy and having an actual objective and figuring out what your game plan is quite a lot. I think when it comes to marketing strategy, just because you don't have a big budget doesn't mean you can't do something. No. I think there's some really important decisions for people to make when it comes to their marketing strategy, and that comes back sometimes to just what kind of product or service are you actually selling.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we're sitting here in late July 2020. The world is quite different from what it was 6 months ago. But even before that, I think there was a stronger push, as we sit here in Australia, a stronger push to buy local. There were people like Dick Smith who for quite a while were pushing this buy local, buy Australian kind of product, and unfortunately the realities of business means that they don't always work out. But there's strong appetite in, especially from a food point of view, but certainly clothes and other commodities of buying local. And I think the marketing strategy that links to that is quite an interesting one, that you don't have to spend a huge amount of money, or the only option isn't to spend a huge amount of money to do a high production piece, to say that we are a quality organisation because we've got a big marketing budget and therefore you should trust us. People fundamentally still want to have a relationship with the company that they buy from, especially in sectors like food or beverage. People like to buy local, right? And I think that's where content marketing can become really, really powerful, that you can create the personality behind the brand by simply putting on a camera that you carry around in your pocket now. You can edit it from your phone, and you can give people a look through of who you are and how you work and what your business is all about, and it might not cost you more than half an hour of your time. I think you need to have a strategy around that. Are you going to do it 3, 4, 5 times? What's your messaging going to be? Where do you place it? I mean, you still need to have a bit of a plan around how you do that. But I think there are ways that in 2020 you can have a really effective marketing strategy that features content marketing that doesn't need to cost you a fortune. I'm certainly not the right person to tell you how to do it, but I know that companies do it really, really well, and that adds value. And if you add value, that normally means that things are working and shareholders are happy, and employees are feeling like they're working in an organisation that is focused on the customer, and that's not a bad place to be.
It's not. And I'm going to take it to the slightly more experimental end of the spectrum than James's strategic planned end of the spectrum, which is to say there is still scope to be a little experimental in this phase. Now, again, don't go random crazy just all of the time. You know, this needs to come into a framework which has an end game, right? But one of the things I think content marketing and the use of tools like this, of blogging, of there's so many, podcasting, whatever you want to think about today, it's a chance to expose in a real, authentic, raw form your value proposition, but your personality, your culture, the kind of folk you are. So it's even more than creating it, it's probably exposing it as much as anything. And I think in this world of, you know, self-selection from a client's perspective, you know, I'll tell you if you're the right supplier for me, giving them a preview pane into you, what you're doing, how you're doing it, what they can expect from you. We've got the tools and abilities to do it.
Are you good people to deal with?
Absolutely.
Still so important.
So we are obviously playing around with some interesting content marketing stuff here, but we thought it would be much more important and useful to throw to people that are doing this, are doing it well, and have some fundamental understanding of some of those principles. So let's hear from them.
G'day Troy, James and everyone. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be joining you today. So the topic of content marketing. I've been asked to add a few comments about how my business, Safetyquip, is utilising content marketing as a digital strategy. Safetyquip is a national business. We have 10 branches around the country supplying workplace safety equipment to industry. So our products include everything from safety boots and high-vis clothing, basic PPE, through to more technical product like confined space entry equipment, fall protection equipment, gas detection gear. In my world, workplace safety gear, there's heaps of digital content online. It's predominantly produced by a handful of global manufacturers of safety equipment, and it's generally not Australian produced, so it's American or European. And it's been through the lawyers, you know, they're large global organisations that are very squeaky clean in their content, but it's somewhat cold for us Australians. So we saw an opportunity to produce, you know, locally Australian content that just speaks in an informal manner to real clients, you know, the clients that we're used to speaking with every day of the week. It's clear to me that producing a video for online use is that it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect conversation. You're never going to look exactly how you'd like to look. You're never going to speak confidently enough. You're never going to position your product or service in the light that you'd ideally like it to be. It's just never going to be perfect. But at some point though, you just need to get on with it. And I think having a video that's 95% where it needs to be to tell your story is probably better to do that and just get on with it than waiting for the perfect video before you release it. You know, I think frequency to an extent is better than 100% quality. In my world, given the client base is safety advisors, procurement managers, occupational hygienists, the platform for us is LinkedIn. LinkedIn speaks directly to those clients. They tend to be on there more frequently. One of the things though that I've learned is a short video is a better video. You know, we've got very limited time now. If you're in a senior role in an organisation, you've got very limited time to look at online content. It's a busy world. It needs to be short. In my opinion, the more senior the person is in your organisation that speaks to your audience, the better. You know, clients tend to naturally respect leadership within a supplier's business. And I think it sends a powerful message to the rest of the team in your own organisation. You know, if the most senior leader is prepared to stand up and talk about whatever game you're in, whatever your craft is, then that sends a powerful message to the rest of the team that that's the business that we're in, and we're all tasked with the responsibility of talking about our industry and ultimately generating revenue. I find the engagement on LinkedIn fascinating. So often you'll have a couple of thousand views of a video and not a lot of likes or comments, and you think you may have missed the mark. But then you go out and see clients the following day, and maybe half your clients will mention that video and talk about things that happened late in the video. And you know, it's clear that they've taken the video in, like you've got it in the hands of the right people and they've taken in the message. It fascinates me. So I think don't be disheartened if you don't seem to have the engagement that you were thinking of. The number of views is perhaps the critical thing. There's several important things when producing a video. Lighting, the subject needs to be well lit. Audio, a lapel microphone is essential. I think movement is important. So the camera, moving around rather than being static. If you have a product, if you sell product rather than a service, having product in the video is great. And ideally having your brand in the video wherever you can. If you've got a easily identifiable logo, I think having that in the video is great.
Yeah, thanks, Troy, and thanks for the opportunity, I suppose, to share this, because it is really something that I suppose I've just stumbled across, as I'll explain. It really, I work for Fuller. We're a brand communication agency here in Adelaide. Been around 27 years now. Started off as a PR agency, and now we've evolved to be a fully integrated brand communication agency. And my role as BD, or business development, relies on going out and seeing people, meeting with people, like a good BD person should be doing. And that kind of got a bit hard back in late March, as we all know, and all the opportunities dried up, and I just couldn't. I was struggling, really. I could, but very quickly though, I saw that I needed to do something. So I didn't struggle for long in that sense. It was more that I knew I needed to still communicate with people, and I have to credit my wife, who suggested, why don't you have a coffee with someone, kind of thing. You make a coffee, get them to have a coffee, you ring them, they speak on the other phone. And I went, sounds good, but what about we do it over a video call? Because around about that time, we were starting to do a lot more Google calls and Zoom calls like this. And then so I said, so I put a call out on my socials and basically said, tomorrow at 10:30, I'm going to set up a meeting request. Anybody who wants to join, let's just call it Coffee with PK. Seriously, it was almost like, this is the first thing that came to my head, and it really has just become that. So it's a Google Hangouts chat, 10:30. It was every day. I really pumped it hard for the first, 12, 14 weeks. I can't remember now. It's been going 21 weeks now, and now it's 3 days a week. But it's turned into being more than, it's niche networking, but it's turned into being, I suppose, a support network for some people. I get lovely feedback from people basically saying how much they really appreciate the opportunity for social interaction, the chance to meet other people. And I really encourage that connection piece, I suppose. Afterwards, I start a little email chat with just the people who are in the chat that day, and make sure that they connect on LinkedIn. And I've heard and seen some really good things that have come out of that. So yeah, I've been very thankful for how it's evolved. But it also has been, the way we look at it, I suppose, is that it has been a good example of content marketing, as you say, in the sense that it provides quality content. So it's facilitated. It's a facilitated discussion, and that I help. But it's not just about me. It's more so saying, oh, John, actually, you and JP Drake, for example, one of our clients, who's actually on the chat today. There was some stuff that he was doing that I knew would be of interest to another guy in the chat. So I basically was able to bring those together. It is targeted in the sense that it is mainly South Australian businesses. But I'm happy for anyone to join the chat. And certainly today we had 2 people from Victoria. I've had people, but they had South Australian connections again. And I had people from overseas. And the whole idea, I suppose, like in good content marketing, is to potentially meet clients' needs. I suppose we're sharing business ideas. We're celebrating success stories. And I suppose we're facilitating a bit of solution development in some degree. And it may not happen in this particular forum, but at least it opens up the opportunities. And I suppose, and whilst also doing it for no charge, and it's certainly not a sales pitch as well. So, because my job at the end of the day is I was obviously to plant the seed about Fuller. I am a salesperson, but I've never been a sales cowboy, I suppose. I've always had that relationship building role, in everything that I've done. And I know people don't want to be sold to at the best of times, certainly at networking functions. And I suppose this is a networking event of its, in a way. And I love it, just how it is evolved. It has led to some work with Fuller, which has been great. And if anything, I suppose it has kept us on people's radar, and reminding people that we are in the business of communication. And that's basically what Coffee with PK is all about. We believe that there's a lot of confusion between what is social media, which we see is a bit of a scattershot approach in a very crowded space, to digital content marketing, which is strategic and it's targeted and it's measurable. And Fuller has always believed in whatever element of marketing communication that we deliver, that there has to be a strategy behind it. So we're very much strategy first. So certainly with content marketing, there has to be a strategy. So there has to be, and you would know this, you talk about strategy all the time, and I love that, and it's so important. So the other real essence of content marketing is authenticity. Because the minute that it looks like advertising, or the customer will switch off, and so it's just slow. It's got to be slow and patient, and it's that, as we know, it's that building that relationship, planting that seed, nurturing that relationship between you, whether your business or your brand, and your client and their business, I suppose. And then I suppose support that with good SEO, good SEM. And all those other acronyms that I get other experts to work on.
Generally speaking, in terms of agribusinesses who employ content marketing, the way it can work best is when the people who are preparing that content, and it's not all about production values necessarily, is really taking the point of view of the audience. So creating value in that content for the person that they're speaking to. So agribusinesses that do that well are the ones that are thinking more roundly about what their people might be looking for, what their customers might be looking for, who their business partners might be looking for. So in terms of content marketing, it's making sure that the content is not from your point of view as the business owner or the marketing manager, or whatever your role is in that business, that you're taking it from the point of view of who you're trying to share that information with. So for content marketing, and depending on your definition of content marketing as well, I tend to believe that all marketing should have a level of content associated with it. It makes it much more interesting. But making sure that you are consistent across the board, that you are sharing information that is of value to your audiences or to your business, and that supports the direction that the business needs to go in. Sharing information that might be fun, but ideally doesn't actually relate to any of either your product, the position you've taken as a business, the place in which you do business, or any of those other 4 Ps of marketing, begs the question, why are you doing it? And particularly if you've got limited resources, and everyone has limited resources in terms of either time or budget or both, making sure that you're working very hard when you're asking someone to engage with your content and watch what you're doing, read the article that you've shared with them. You want to make sure that you're not taking their time for granted as well. So you're really giving them something that's quite valuable, and that maybe ideally builds on a story over time. So businesses, in terms of budgets, there is always constraint over where you can put your limited resources, and unfortunately marketing can be one of those ones, particularly in a startup where there isn't maybe a lot of monetary resource. There might be a lot of time resource available, and that's fantastic. I mean, obviously in the game that we're in, we'd say get the right strategic minds behind it and make sure that what you're doing is going to add value to the business. It's not just cool or funky or topical. If that topic doesn't relate to you and your business, that you don't have value to add into that topic. About businesses who are wanting to use the resources they have as effectively as possible, they, regardless of whether you have $1 million budget or a $100 budget or no budget, make sure that it's really doing the job you need it to do to support the business. Because ideally, particularly if you're a smaller business, particularly if you're a startup, or like we see in the agribusiness game, where there are big seasonal variations, you might have a really good couple of years, and then you really have to pull back the reins. Trying to keep that consistency of message in a way that makes sense. In the good years, you can go a bit bigger. You can share your content in a way that might be a little bit more polished, or a bit more bespoke, or a little bit more wide. In the leaner years, it might come down to really equipping all of your teams with a few basic tools, and sharing some videos like this that are really more of a discussion than really high production value.
Fantastic insights. Probably more than we could have generated here ourselves, James, and so we're very, very grateful for those kind of thoughts from those people. So James, as we sit here and think about this idea of content marketing, and I'm an SME owner or leader, or I'm toying around with this idea, I had a conversation with the guy in WA this morning, runs an agribusiness, and they're getting more heavily invested in things like, videos in the paddock, creating podcasts of what's happening in their RD&E space so that their agronomists can listen on their 2-hour drives. Starting down this path, we're seeing content marketing permeate into all kind of sectors in all kinds of ways. You're sort of thinking on observations or takeouts for your average SME owner.
I think there's a paradigm shift that some may have to go through, that marketing, which used to be quite planned and often above the line, you're paying for adverts, you're doing a newsletter, it was quite structured. I think being open to the idea of doing things quicker, faster, cheaper, that sort of in a way show staff behind the doors, show customers behind the doors, give them an insight into the actual business, be open to it. And I think the cost and the risk, again, I'll preempt this with saying, if you're the marketing person, make sure you get approval before you go and start creating marketing content, because while it might be a great idea, you might find that those sitting above you may not like the idea as much. So I think you still need to go through that process. As much as I'd like to say, Troy, go and experiment to create these things, I think you still need to make sure that you're not going to upset a previous view of the world.
It's easier to beg forgiveness and ask permission, isn't it, James?
Yeah, so long as you're begging while you've got a job, I think that's fine. But I think that it's a different world, and I think it's, we don't know what marketing looks like next year or the year after. But if you keep on doing what we did 3 years ago, very quickly you find yourself well behind, and that's not a good place to be. So you've got to be open to experimenting with whether it's marketing or anything else. And I think this is a really quick and easy way to consider trying something different.
Be brave, and whatever your version of brave looks like, whatever's culturally appropriate and signed off at board level of brave,
keeps you employed.
Test stuff, right? We were talking earlier about, if you're not embarrassed by your first kind of forays into content marketing, you're probably not pushing the envelope far enough. And so, be okay that this is an iterative kind of a process. And I think some of the commentary that we heard from some of our experts kind of testified to that as well. So this is obviously a little opportunity and experiment in content marketing for us as well, but we aim to create some value via it for business owners, business leaders who see the merits in sitting down and thinking on the business with a cup of coffee, listening to a couple of roosters chat with a couple of other smart people every so often. So if this engages you, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd love to kind of get your feedback, get your thoughts. We'd love to get you to come and sit on the advisory deck with us and have a chat about your business. We sit in the corners of a number of organisations, so we know a little bit, but it's more important that we sort of, have that conversation and engage with you. So details down the bottom there. James, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the advisory deck.